We're on air. I'd like you to spell your name for me, please, very slowly and very plainly.
Yeah, it's D-A-G-B-J-O-R-N. That means Dargbjörn, and Johnston is J-O-H-N-S-O-N. Johnston, straightforward.
Yeah, and where was you born?
Swedish, and Johnston is Norwegian, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so where was you born?
I was born in the town of Narvik.
Spell it.
North of Darg. I have to repeat again. November Alpha Romeo India Kilo.
Yeah.
And it's 200 circle in Norway.
Very good. Now, John, when did you immigrate to Australia?
I came in 1955 on a ship called Mungabara to have the Olympic game in 1956.
Mm-hmm. And
mainly,
yes, and then let me ask.
I came with a friend called Jim Collins, and we decided to buy a car in Sydney, and we had help from a friend, Mr. Johnston. His father was head of Ampol and a couple other companies in those days in Australia. Because you couldn't buy a car in those days, like straight up.
Yeah.
You had to be a cocky or farmer.
Yeah.
And we were able to get a second-hand utility.
Yes. And now, Jimmy Collins, where'd you meet him at the Olympic Games?
No. We came together from United States over.
I'm with you. Very good. Now, what got you interested in opal?
It was an article in the Holiday magazine.
In what magazine?
In the Holiday magazine in the United States.
Okay. And what did the article say?
It was an article about the opal field, and they were barbecuing a little baby kangaroo, but of course they didn't eat that. It was for the journalists so they could take pictures. And there was Eric Stevens and Ray Hawkins from 12 Mile. They were in that article.
Yes. And what years did you go to Cooper Pedy?
In 1955.
You went up to Cooper Pedy, and when you got to Cooper Pedy, did you both mine?
Now what happened, we went and got organized in Adelaide from a Mr. Badenot. He was working for American Consulate.
Mr. Who?
There was a detail how to get to Cooper Pedy, and we drove to Port Augusta the first day.
Yeah.
And then started out early in the morning, about 5 in the morning, on the second trip to Kinguria, and we arrived there nightfall in Kinguria on the second day.
Yeah.
And then we had to wait for a couple of days in Kinguria, because nobody was allowed to, it was foolish to drive just any day. Normally, most people drove up to Cooper Pedy 1 or 2 days before the mail truck left on Fridays there.
Mm-hmm.
So in case that someone broke down, someone would pick them up.
Yes.
Because there was no traffic in those days.
Yes.
So then we left early in the morning. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. And it was the day before the mail truck. About 5 o'clock, into Kupili just the sun was setting.
Yeah. And when you got the...
Of course, yeah, go on.
When you got to Kupili, as the sun was setting, you had somewhere to stay. Who did you meet? What did you do?
No, it was no place to stay there. Mr. and Mrs. Brewster was the only place there. It was only, they had a little shed there with a couple of gas pumps, you know, those gas pumps. And there was no accommodation, and all of us was below the hill on the left-hand side. I believe that's where the Open Motel is, right there, underground Open Motel is now.
Yeah.
It was a little dugout that they said it's all right to sleep in. So we drove down there. It was dark by this time, and then we could see there was a lot of bushes and stuff inside. So we didn't sleep in there. We slept in the back of the ute. You know, in those days they had us, you know, the cover on the back of the ute.
Yes.
And so that's the first day we slept there, and then of course the next day we burnt, we put more grass in the, you know, burnt little, you know, put a fire into the little dugout. It was only one room to kill the redback spiders and all that.
Yeah. Now, how did you start mining? Where did you start mining? What happened?
Well, what happened, it was only a couple of people there, and they said, you know, the best place to go to mine is on 12 Mile, that's called Dora Galley later on.
Yeah.
So, you know, after a day or so, we figure out what we're going to do and get provision. We drove out to 12 Mile, and we met Ray Hawkins, we met Eric Stevens, and we met Jimmy Tinlin.
Yes.
And we met one other guy, I got to think of his name, an old guy. And Johnny Bargalowski, of course, Johnny Bargalowski, if you know, is probably the most decorated airman, you know, alive in Australia. He used to lead the head of the Aztec parade. I think he had some Polish guy with 20 or 30 credits.
Yeah.
And it was Walter. Walter was his mechanic, and what was the other guy's name? Two guys was his mechanic that was working together. And that was all the population of mining in Kupili, just about.
Yeah,
and so there was one other guy, and very, very important guy, and that was the Swede. Hang on, let me think of his name. He's a Swede. Anyway, I'll think of his name. Nelly. Hang on, Nelly was his dog. Anyway, he told us that he was mining in a place there, and he said, you know, if you put a hole further down over here, and then drive towards me, you probably get opal. You know, it was no such a thing as claims anything in those days.
Yeah.
You know, people just said, you know, you mine here and I mine here. If it's some good opal, okay, you can come towards me, I'll go towards you, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Vic Williams was his name.
Yeah.
And very well-known guy. I got a lot of pictures of him and all that.
Yeah, Vic Williams.
Yeah, Vicky Williams, yeah.
Yep.
And the reason he came to do opal is this little side story. He came from the United States. He was a sheep rancher up in North Dakota, somewhere around there. And two of the guys, he and another guy, They were at, they had a station at, just north of Mount I'm just trying to think of the station, just north of Kupidi there. And when they had a bunch of wool going down to Adelaide, the truck tipped over, so they just walked away from it. That was in the old days when you know, like $5 made a big difference.
Yeah.
And then he with Jimmy Ted, he went and went to Kupidi and started mining.
Okay, now you brought yourself some mining gear or windlass and you started mining.
Well, Mr. Badenov got us a bunch of gear in Adelaide, but of course it was the wrong gear. It was big picks and you know, big rope. You didn't need winches in those days because if you couldn't throw it out the dirt out of the holes, you wouldn't bother about working.
Yeah.
You know, like if you went down, you know, 7, 8, 9 feet, people say, "What? 9 feet? Are you crazy? That's pretty deep." You know?
Yeah.
So you had to learn to. You got the short shovel, and you learned pretty quickly how to pick the dirt out 9 feet or 10 feet or 11, 12 feet. You pick it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you had later on you had those wooden winches that we made up with three little hooks on the bottom. Yeah. And you know, the buckets on the others.
York hoist.
So 15 of hooks. Yeah. No. York hoist came a lot later.
Well, you're talking about a windlass.
Yeah, just the windlass, just wooden windlass. That's all.
Yeah.
York hoist come a lot later.
Did you get any opal out your first mine?
What happened was that we were able to buy. It was on 12 Mile, one of those small caravans, but it was really dilapidated. And just in front of the caravan was a hole. About 10, 15 meters. Yeah. And I went down this hole, and I started scratching in it. And on the side of the shaft, a vertical started appearing, and it was going down. Now I got a picture of this vertical. Yeah. And it was pretty big pieces. Some of the pieces was like 250 gram chunks of butter. You know.
Yeah, like half a house brick.
Yeah, and I still got pieces. I've got some pieces. I still kept some pieces. I have it here. Yeah. And also I got a little picture of it, and it wasn't a full color material. No, but I remember this guy, Mr. Harold Brady, came, and he was the only buyer. Yeah. And he said, "Yeah, that's pretty nice stuff. You can get probably $0.10 an ounce for it, you know." You know, because it was white. I mean, everyone was just looking for large pieces, full color, and you know, pretty flashy. You know, it had to be pretty flashy. Yeah. So,
how much of it did you get? How much of it did you get out of that?
Well, you know, not much. Probably only got a couple of £100 worth of material. Yeah. Total, and then we went over to where Vic Williamson told us to mine. Yeah. You know, like Jim has gone over that mine already. Yeah. And we found sort of like what we used to call a niggerhead. It was sort of an allanite ball. Yeah. Like just a ball. Yes. And it had some opal on the side of it, you know, where it's got this hard allanite stopped the material, and it was that was pretty decent color. Yeah. So we got somewhat of that, went to Adelaide, and it was, I think it was Wollaston that bought the material in those days.
Yeah.
You know, Mr. Wollaston in Adelaide.
Yeah, Morton Wollaston. Yes.
Again?
Can you hear me?
And, yeah, go, what did you say again?
I said, yeah, it was Morton Wollaston who was...
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, he was the only one that was really in buying, and then, you know, things started to move, and we got some more material there and mined, and then where the big break came was we went to 14 Mile.
Yeah.
And then we what happened there? I'm sorry. We went hunting. A bunch of guys went hunting. You know, myself, you know, a few of the guys, and a fellow called Kenny Carter and Kevin Kent.
Yeah.
And at 20 Mile, it's a sort of a valley. The guy went in the creek to, you know, have a bowel movement. But you know, and then he saw some opal sticking out of the ground. And so started to dig and got a lot of opal out of that. I mean, you know, it ran for about 20 meters.
Yeah.
And it was. We had drums and drums of it, you know, 5-gallon drums of it.
Yeah.
And we had this big tent, and I remember it was in the winter, cold as anything. And you know, we had one of those army tents, you know, big army tents. And I remember we putting kerosene on the fire and just, you know, just to make it warm, you know, there, and all the smoke and ice noise. And people used to come and see what we're doing, and we had those 5-gallon drums as chairs, but they were full of opal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do have a very interesting picture of that material, because out of Timlin shed, you know, like it's sort of a, you know, it wasn't shed, it was, you know, hats and bags. Remember we used to put.
Hey, listen, what year was that out at the 20 Mile? What year?
55, 56. 55, 56.
Yeah, yeah.
Because Jim went to the Olympic game. I never went because I was finding opal, and I remember it was hot as hell.
Yeah.
And I stayed at the mine because I thought this is great. This is you know.
How many of you shared in the opal?
Well, in that parcel was you know, 4. We were sort of, but it was mainly you know, Kevin and Kenny Carter.
Yeah.
And of course Kevin Kent, you know, he's sort of up in Queensland nowadays.
Yeah. And with
the money, they bought a bulldozer, and then we went on to 14 Mile and started mining.
Before we get to the 14 Mile, who did you sell the opal to? Was it Wollaston?
I think Wollaston bought that too. That's correct. Yes.
And have you had? Oh, and
was Adelaide. It was only he was only the real buyer. There was not really any other buyers. Then except for Harold Brady and Jimmy Brown, I think it was. Brown used to come up there and do a bit of buying.
Yeah.
Mainly Harold Brady, and I got some very good picture of Harold Brady in his dugout there.
Very good. Now listen, how much did you get? How much did Wollaston pay you for it?
You know, I can't remember, but there wasn't. You know, it wasn't that much. Maybe it's 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. But of course, you could buy a lot in those days for 5,000 pounds.
Yeah.
I remember a holding utility only cost 400 or 500 pounds. You know.
Yes.
And And anyway, we got this Armor bulldozer and this Diamond T truck to bring it up on, and so you know, that was.
Well, was it the first bulldozer or not on Coopedi that time?
No, that was the first real bulldozer in Coopedi.
Yeah.
That was the first dozer in Coopedi.
Yeah.
Most of the equipment we ended up with having the first refrigerator, even if it was real kerosene type of thing.
Yeah.
The refrigerator. You know, the first pressure cooker, I remember the pressure cooker, this is interesting. We used to do the cooking in a pressure cooker, do the dishes in a pressure cooker, and we used to do the laundry in a pressure cooker. Because we had to go into Coopedi on the weekend, and we only had a 50-gallon drum had to last us the whole week.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so you know, it was pretty rough. It was interesting. I was thinking of a few things. It's like when we went out, we had breakfast, and then we came back lunchtime. But at breakfast time, we cut the front part of a 44-gallon drum and had a hole dug underneath and some rocks, and you know those Dutch ovens there.
Yeah.
And what we did, we came back lunch, of course, the coals was burnt down, and then we put maybe like a lamb or some meat and some food in it with the coals on top of the lid and some on the bottom.
Yeah.
And came back in the evening, and you had the best meal ever. But naturally, because you were pretty hungry after this work, you know?
Yeah. Now listen, after you got the bulldozer, take me through the different strikes of opal you found, and when.
Well, it was a lot of different strikes there. You know, on 12 Mile, up there, but what I started to do, and Jim started to do, we started getting into the buying field.
Okay,
there was a fellow called Koska.
Now start again. What was his name?
Mr. Bill Koska. Costco. He's you know, Costco Hill. He's been there since 1918 or something like that. Real old time in Coopedi.
Yeah.
And he taught me a lot about opal. Matter of fact, his scales, he gave me his scales, and I have those scales. It's just two tobacco tins put together, you know?
Yeah.
And sort of, you know, hanging. And he told me about all the places with opal, and also, you know, what to look for and all this, you know, thing.
Yes.
What area was cracky, what's not cracky. And so, you know, we started to attempt to buying, so we did some buying because people didn't have you know, didn't have the means or cars, so they only had a few T-model Fords there.
Was Jim buying with you at the same time? Were you and Jim Collins buying together now?
Yeah, we were buying material together. We were buying in the morning, running around to see if we could get a stone here, stone there, and then mining in the morning and running around buying a little bit in the afternoon.
Yeah. Yep.
And you know, we got a little parcel here. So what we did then, we waited till Harold Brady came up, and then we did some deal and sold it to him.
Yes.
And then, of course, later on, we drove down ourselves and to Sydney and sold it to him in Sydney. He was the only real buyer in those days. Of course, a little bit later, Greg Sherman started to buy, but he was selling it to Costello.
Yes.
And Costello was selling it a little bit to Japan in those days.
Yeah.
He was importing wigs from Japan.
Yeah, so we were still in the late 50s at this stage.
Yeah, it was late 50. I remember when, the Olympus Australia was, it came from 8 Mile and, what's his name? He gave it to me.
Frank Tethridge. Frank Tethridge.
No.
Frank Tethridge and Bert.
No. Tethridge came later.
Bert Wilson got that.
No, Bert Wilson.
Yeah.
Bert Wilson, that's correct.
Yeah.
And I think Greg Sherman ended up with it, and I sold it to Open and Cherney. I'm pretty sure that.
Yeah, that's what happened, yes.
Yeah. And because Greg and I was pretty good friends, we became sort of semi. We worked together later on very, very closely.
Yeah.
And it's what else happened?
Okay, now tell me, you started buying at Cooper Pedy. You were mining at Cooper Pedy with the bulldozer. Did you get any really good strikes with the bulldozer?
Yeah, we got some strikes.
Well, tell me one and where it was.
Yeah, because the problem with the bulldozer was that we couldn't get through the hard bands because it was a winch operator. It wasn't hydraulic.
Yeah.
So you had to use back reapers going back and forth. And I remember we bent the U-frame. This is very interesting. We bent the U-frame on a 14 mile. And the only way we could bring it back was digging a hole and a tunnel to another hole and fill it up with wood and start a fire to heat it up. And with jacks and steel rods were able to get the name into place where it was, bent on the thing. I mean, really primitive. And we had to. I remember when we had to do the engine up, and we did roll on the field, and the bearings. This is how I remember.
Yeah.
The bearing that came from the cylinder on the engine, I used to put on top of the refrigerator because we had Hessian bags on the side of the fridge, both sides, and on the front, and those bearings was perfect. 3 bearings sitting on top with a 4-gallon drum sitting on top of that, and it was dripping water on the Hessian bag to keep the fridge cold.
Yeah.
Because it was a kerosene fridge, because it was pretty hot up there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, now how long did you buy for at Cooper Pedy?
Oh, it was quite a few years.
Can you remember?
And then, I got to look at my pictures and record, because then I get more details from it. And then I moved to Anamook and did a bit of buying there.
Yeah, but what I need to know is what happened sort of chronologically with you at Cooper Pedy before you went to Anamook, right? And so we can make a story out of it. And this is the interesting thing. You got some opal out of a mine, so you already told me something very interesting about going down that shaft near the caravan, and there was the vertical. They all come out descriptive, and you make it look really nice in a story, right? And when you
it was talking about the luck of the game. I mean, here I'm going in a shop that someone stopped digging about 5 feet or 6 feet.
Yeah.
It was just in the little sandstone from the Luvio.
Yeah.
And I start making the shop a little bit bigger. If the guy gone 2 inches to the left, it was to the left, 2 inches more, he would have got into that vertical, and the vertical went 2 or 3 or 4 feet down, and of course it went forward too.
Yeah. Now listen,
that's the really luck of the game,
It is really. Now, in some of your other mines and some of your other cuts, did you ever find any verticals?
Yeah, we found verticals, a lot of verticals.
Can you describe one in one mine?
The one on 20 Mile was a big vertical, and even when we went back many years later, scratched around there, we found another vertical that we found that by that time we got more money for the opal. We got about 4,000 or 5,000 pounds out of that thing, you know.
How far did the vertical go the second time you went back to the 20 Mile? How long did it run? 10 feet?
It ran only for about 3 meters, but it was a long way, you know, like sort of it started. It was about 3 meters long and about a meter high.
Yeah.
Where the other vertical that went 20, 30 meters in was only about 6 inches, you know, like, 6, 8 inches a foot or something like that.
Yeah, I understand. What about explaining to me the difference between the grades of opal? Now, the opal you got out of the 14 Mile, what was that? And then the 12 Mile and the 20 Mile. What was the difference in these opals?
Well, on the 12 Mile, it was a lot of white base, like in a vertical there that I got, and also it was more sort of green crystal, and then in the alluvial, that was at alunite there. The niggerhead.
Yeah.
Then, of course, we got some really nice red material in alluvial that's, like 2 feet in the ground in the gravel. You know, you get pockets and seam in the gravel there. Yeah. And that was the best vessel. That's the way they found them all open on 8 Mile, you know, in 36. Yeah. All in the shallow there. Yeah. And so that was pretty good. And then we went to 11 Mile, and we dug there. We found some nice opal, and it was about the same time when Christianos arrived, because I was standing in that old caravan thing and looking up the hill. And here is this Volkswagen type of bus coming, and it sort of stalled on top of the hill, so I started walking up there. Yeah. Here is Mr. Cristiano with his wife and all his kids.
What was his first name?
What's that?
What was Cristiano's first name? What was his first?
I just got to remember.
Alex? Was it Alex or?
No,
Peter?
Hang on, I will come about. And his wife was actually Turkish, from Turkey. I remember she used to take the Turkish here. And little Eli Cristiano was just a little tiny kid. Yeah. And there was the other brothers there, you know the brothers there was Emmanuel and Ross Cristiano was there too. Yeah. And actually we showed them a place where to dig on 12 Mile, and then I even helped the old man, it could have been Alex Cristiano, help him to, like when we had the claim of 8 Mile where he found a lot of opal later on, on 8 Mile, because they were mining up the Larkin's Polly, and they were getting a bit of good opal there, but then of course 8 Mile turned out to be really good.
Do you know the year, and do you know anything about the opal and how much they got from the 8 Mile?
It was megabucks. The only way I would have to go through my newspaper articles and the pictures, and as soon as I see the pictures, I will remember the years, because it's sort of, I remember. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was the rain. I went out with McDougal's and Aboriginal parkman. Yeah, we rounded out the Aboriginal and everybody. Well, we'd never seen white people before. That was before they would start dropping the atomic bombs at Maralinga, where they just finished dropping the bombs at Emu. And because we used to watch the bombs go up at night and in the day there in Kupili. And even I remember when they closed the road, this is on the sideline, between, like the main road going to Kupili and the guys in the white sort of costumes or whatever, I didn't know in those days, because it was raining a little bit, so they closed the road off.
Yeah, so, radiation fallout.
Well, we didn't know that. I was looking at the airplane going through those radiation clouds. I mean, today I thought it was just clouds. I mean, nobody knew then. I mean, those guys would be dead for sure. Yeah. But was something that was, talking about closing the road, let me just skip back to something. Nobody in Australia actually knew about Kuripiri. Nobody knew. You could ask anyone. But I think it was 55 or 56, they had a Redex trial. A trial that went right through Australia and up to Kuripiri and up north and what's the name, Jellenite Jack and all those old-timers, You go back in the history, and that, because that was a station for the Redex trial to stop, refuel and everything, because it was just mud road. It wasn't graded road, it was just steel tracks up north, So it was no graded road at all. And that's what made people, on the radio, they found out about the place called Kuripiri. Yeah. Before then, nobody in Adelaide anywhere knew about this place Kuripiri except for the Redex trial. And that's sort of, and then found out that it was all of this place Kuripiri, and this is where the Redex trial stopped. So when we came back to Adelaide and to Melbourne and Sydney, everyone seemed to know about the place then. Yeah. Before, nobody knew about this place.
Now listen, before we go any further, we'll pick the story up here in a minute, right? But before we go any further, you have mentioned to me that you have a number of photos, right? That you've taken.
Some nice pictures.
Yeah, of the of that slide and various other things at Kupili. Now, I don't know if you're willing to loan some of them to me, and if you do, I can scan them and I send them straight back to you. And so if you were to lend me any photos that you think might be appropriate to go in the book, and if I use them, your name will be under the photo, courtesy of Darg Johnston. And I would scan them into the book, into my computer, and whatever photos I used would have your name under them. But it would be critical that I had a lot of information about those photos so I could write about them.
No, I'll have the information with it. Actually, you should get hold of Stan Keeley. I sent he and his kids a whole bunch of pictures of Stan and his kids and on the Whipple field way back, because my dad gave me a Retina 3C camera with color films where they couldn't develop them in the U.S. I had to send it back to Rochester, New York.
Yeah. Now the thing is, I don't need a lot of photos, but I just need some really good ones. If you had one of yourself there and Jim on Kupili with some opal in your hands or around some opal or your camp or something like that, that would be excellent. And something like that. I don't need a lot. I don't need a lot of...
The more you know what you need, and because you know what's better for you. And so what I would do is I'll get as much together as I can and just send it, and you use what you need.
Yeah, just one...
And on some of them I will put the story to it, and then we can go from there, because what I think is all right, you might not think is all right, and what
yeah, I understand.
You know, and other ones you think is fantastic, you know?
Yeah. So time is premium on this, just about, and but the sooner you can raise, you're going away, so you're not going to come back for a couple of months.
I'm going to be back just before Thanksgiving, so I can get it together then.
Yeah.
Get hold of Stan Keaty in Sydney. You know Stan Keaty, don't you?
Yeah, but I don't. Look, I don't need a lot of photos. I've got hundreds of them, right? But what I do need...
He might have some picture from the old days up there in a dugout or something, you know.
Yeah.
Just from... You need something from way back.
What I need something... You know? What I need something which surrounds you, right?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, okay, I get you. Well, you remember it was only about 6-7 miners in Coopede, real miners in Coopede in 55.
Yeah.
I mean, because Brewster, Jack and Edna Brewster was not minor.
Yeah.
And, like the Hawkins family, the wife was there and the 2 kids was there, but it was only, Mr. Hawking and Tinland was Eric Stevens.
Yeah.
They were mining together, and then was Jimmy Tinland. Jack, Jesus, what's his name again? Jack, the other one, Jack, and then Williams there.
Yeah.
Williams, he was a Swede there, and that was it. Later on, of course, after the Red X trial, we had a lot of people coming in there, and
while you was there in those early days, while you was there in those early days, did you see any really good super opal, even from anybody? Mine.
Yeah, we used to. We had some pieces from 8 Mile that people got, a little bit here and there. That was super good. Red. I mean, it's like bricks of opal. But only maybe an inch thick or so.
Yeah. Did you buy it?
Full color red.
Did you buy?
No. This what I saw that. Harold Brady bought.
Yes.
I did buy some very good material from Ryan's Hill. That was because Ryan Hill used to have a lot of ginger whisker in it, but this material was really good. Yeah. And here I'm trying to get a name for opal buying. I'm a kid, young adult, and. So I remember I paid £45 an ounce for it.
Wow!
And everyone thought that was beautiful. I never seen like the best of the best. And everyone thought £45 an ounce. That is unbelievable. That much money.
Yeah.
That is real. This is material that you give. Mega bucks for one piece, one or 2 pieces, and of course you couldn't sell chips in those days. It was only bigger stones. It was only bigger stones, and the chips only came later on when Stan Keaty and got organized Hong Kong for Mr. George Manning. Red Bank Hall, the factory in Hong Kong in 1960. That came in 1960. And that's actually made the opal industry, instead of being, 96, I think it was 200 people there, and all of a sudden, about a year later, 2 years later, it was 2,000 because now you could sell all the material.
Yeah. My, oh my, yeah.
Well,
when did, okay.
Yeah, go on.
You and Jim, how long did you stay at Cooper Pedy? You were buying most of the time later before you left?
Yeah, we were mining and buying and driving around. I remember 56 we went to the Hayricks mine. I was in 2056. We drove up to Broken Hill and across the Darling River, or the river there, and to Burke and up to Lightning Ridge and hang around there for a little while, see what happened. And of course the Hayricks mine there, because McCracken was the only one that was actually mining there.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now, you must have left Cooper Pedy about 1960 to go to Andamuka, did you?
Yeah, I think it was 1960, because I think I built. What happened? I think it's 1960, because on the building I built there, it's 1960, and I remember I bought an airplane in 1961 and built the airstrip, but because nobody had airplanes in those days down there.
Yeah, that's at Andamuka.
Andamuka, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now you went to Andamuka. Jim went to Andamuka for a little while with you?
Yeah, and Jim went there, and then he went his way, and I went my way, and I just kept on Andamuka buying,
Okay, before we go any further,
buying in the afternoon.
Before we go any further, you and Jim divide the ways in 1961, because Jim was here at Lightning Ridge buying sometime in 1961, camped here at Lightning Ridge.
Correct. We were still together in 61. We were getting black opal. We had, I think we had, I'll tell you who was buying for us was Molyneux, I think, for a while.
Yeah.
We were buying, and then Molyneux was Molyneux there in 61 or what?
Yes. But Jim was camped here at 61, and he was buying a lot of opal. It was coming out of the old Cochrane. And,
That's correct.
Yeah, and was you still in partnership with him while he was here, or you?
We were in partnership because he was doing the black, and I was doing the rough material.
Yeah.
Well, we parted together. We started a company called Gem Export.
Yeah.
And then, so he was doing the black opal, I was doing the white opal, and then my brother was doing in 64, he came into it in 64, and he was doing the sapphires. So Jim concentrated on the black opal, and I'll tell you who else was buying. We had a Canadian buying for us, getting money to buy, and what is the guy that's head of your committee up there?
That was
He's the head of the miners committee.
Yeah, he's not anymore, but Jerry Lomax.
Jerry Lomax and those guys, they were just young guys, and they were buying for us. We were getting a lot of black opal out of the ridge from those guys, and they didn't have money, so we supplied first Molyneux there, but he was, I'm telling you, he was drinking a lot, so he was unreliable at the time. And then so we looked into the Canadian, and they were started to buy for us, and of course, really, it was Jim Collin or Gem Export that really made them. Later on, what they became, you know. Because Greg Sherman was not in black opal in those days.
No.
Mainly in all, and none of the other guys. Harold Brady didn't buy.
Yeah.
Greg Sherman didn't buy. Stan Key didn't buy. There was nobody bought actually black opal in those days except for ourselves. And maybe who wasn't in Melbourne? Who else was in?
Yeah, David
used to come up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not quite sure from down there. That'd be Altman and Sherney. They used to buy a bit.
No. They never ever came to the field. They never were on the field, I don't think.
Oh, yeah.
They were in Anamuka Kupiti.
No, they come to Lightning Ridge.
Yeah, they might have come to Lightning Ridge, but I don't know if they relied on, because they bought a lot from us.
Yeah.
And
yeah, they brought from everyone. David Kaplan used to come to the ridge a lot.
Yeah, David Kaplan, yeah, because David Kaplan was in Japan together with Costello.
Yeah, and they worked.
And them worked together.
Yeah, and
yeah, I remember Kaplan. Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, and did you sell anything to Kaplan?
Yeah, Jim sold, because he was handling the black opal. He sold a lot to Kaplan.
Yeah, and
then of course that came in and started buying a lot of black opal. His name was Hasikawa.
Adikata?
No, Hasikawa-san.
I don't know.
And then later on, Yamamoto-san came in.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yamamoto originally only bought rough material, good. I have him on film, like the film back in the stuff for me and all that, guys. But Hasikawa was the first one. What happened? He was buying rough Anamuka rough, Kupiti rough, and then he started buying a few black opal that he put in his rings. He brought rings over that he was wearing, right?
Yeah.
And I remember he had just synthetic stone, whatever it was in it, and he must have paid it when he left. And then we found a nice black opal that fitted in it, and he took it back that way, because they must have had very strict custom regulation in Japan,
Yeah.
So that's how he got into black opal, and then he liked it more and more and more and more, and that's how it happened,
I'm going to turn the tape around in a couple of seconds. We're nearly at the end, but I'll get you to spell his name for me.
Who?
I'll get you to, if you can you spell that Japanese man's name? Can you know how to spell it?
Hasikawa?
Yeah.
Hasikawa?
Yeah.
Gee, I don't remember. I'm going to look through my logbooks and stuff, because I used to flew them around, and I got a lot of pictures on the back of the picture with Hasikawa, myself, and Jim at dinners in Sydney, I had to entertain those guys on the back. I have all the names on them,
Yeah.
And I probably have pictures of them all,
Yeah, that would be very good. When we turn the tape...
I got a picture of the first time Mr. Lau, Mr. Lau became a very big, he was one of the big cutters in Hong Kong, became one of the big bars in the Kupiti and South Australia. Remember Mr. Lau?
Yeah,
Mr. Lau.
I don't know, was that Lou Johnston or not? No?
Oh, no, Jackson Lau.
Yep.
He probably was the biggest bar in Kupiti for many years, but the biggest bar in Hong Kong for a long time, and I took him the first trip in my airplane up to Kupiti with his banker's friend, and I got pictures of them. They're standing in amongst some Stuart Pease, and he was banker guys in the middle of dressing in those black suits,
Well, I'd love a copy. I'd love a copy of that. I'd love a copy. Yeah.
No, I got a lot of good shots from the old days, and even from clippings, even Lightning Ridge. There was nobody in Lightning Ridge when we were up there.
Yeah, I know. You gave me a copy of all your clippings, and you photocopied them and sent them to me. You don't.